Morning, everyone. This is a public presentation committee. Committee of the whole. Wrong paper. Correction. I was wrong. Committee of the whole for May 14, 2024. This meeting will be conducted in person and via conference call in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, Section 199. Chambers will be open to members of the public while continuing to use the current telecommunicating process in place. To join via meeting conference, dial the number 403-917-1764 and enter the PIN when prompted. There's a meeting agenda before us. Any additions or deletions? Seeing none, motion to approve the agenda.
Also move.
Motion on the floor. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. We have one item to discuss today, item 2.1, Reserves Policy Update 2024. And I believe Joel's there to present for us. Go ahead.
Morning, committee. Joel from administration here, just to walk through just quickly some of the potential reserve policy changes that we're thinking of bringing forward. I'm just going to scroll down to our schedule just so I can walk through these. You can kind of see them a bit more clearly. So I believe we're proposing about 5 changes to the current reserve policy. The first change would be this a recent resolution 240245, which was put forward to investigate options around abandoned buildings. And perhaps that might sound familiar because it was, I believe, in February. It's not too long ago. And so what we're proposing with this, or to address this reserve, there's kind of 2 solutions or 2 ideas that help solve 2 issues. One would be that the standard community infrastructure reserve, which was amended last year, and it was just kind of mislabeled. And so when we investigated some more history around that, we found some more information, some more background. And we've determined, since it has a current balance of $80,000, historically, the balance appears to be derived from just general tax revenue, and that we thought it would be a good candidate to repurpose this reserve for a new abandoned structures reserve. And so instead of creating a new one, that we're proposing changing the name and the purposes around this, as you can see on the screen. The red are just kind of the prior policy that we would be striking out, and then the green would be the new amendments that we would be adding in. So like I had mentioned, it has a current balance of 80,000, so we have kind of a starting point then for doing some work on abandoned structures. We're also proposing including this little blurb here about a $50,000 annual contribution from the operating budget, just to begin building that up and making headway on those structures. So that's kind of the first reserve change. I suppose before I go on, I'll just ask the committee if there's any questions around that one.
Any questions? Seeing none, go ahead.
Sure. Second one is really straightforward. It has to do with the gravel reclamation reserve. And so what we had found is that the gravel reserve levy, which was being charged in prior years, it was just kind of going to general revenue. And in the report itself, we provided a table with I think back for 3 or 4 years of total revenue received from that. It's not really material, but just for consistency, we were proposing changing the funding source allowance on this particular reserve so that we could just be more proper and send those levy reserve balances to where they should be. And in terms of materiality, I believe it was like $7,000 approximately. I could even scope up here to a report. Yeah, $7,000. To give you an idea, that current reserve balance is just over $1.7 million. So it's not material, but just kind of cleaning the books a little bit and making things a bit more proper. Is there any questions around that particular proposal change? Okay, so then there's 2 new reserves, kind of address them both simultaneously because they're very similar. And they're related to the Wheatland Wind Community Benefits Fund and the Solar Community Benefits Fund. Very similar grants, a very similar type structure and contractor arrangement with these providers. And so we're adding these just to ensure that we're tracking the funds as per the contracts and making sure that the balance sits segregated and they're aside for those purposes. A kind of slight variation between the two is on the Wheatland Wind Fund. There is a stipulation of a max cap on that balance of $50,000. So that's one of the differences between those two new grant proposals. Sorry, I should add as well, we did add a little blurb on here that the reserve would be excluded from receiving the allocations of the general investment revenue. So that leads to kind of the last change, which is for the policy, not the schedule, but the policy itself. I'll just scroll up to that section. If I can get there. So we just show just a little clause that we added in to that interest earned in green here. So we would change it to be the method of applying interest to individual restricted reserves is to prorate the interest based on the balances across all accounts unless otherwise noted as excluded from interest for a given reserve. Just adds a little bit of more flexibility, even if council or the committee or council chose to impute interest on those grants themselves. I would still recommend including this just because it adds that flexibility for moving forward. And that concludes all of the proposed reserve changes. Staff are available for any questions.
Thank you, Joel. Questions, discussion?
I just have a question about, so I'm just trying to get my head around a grant versus a reserve. So for Wheatland Wind and the solar one, like currently they have an amount of money that they allocate every year. People apply for it. They disperse whatever is applied, or, you know, they figure out how much to give to different organizations. So why would there be a reserve then? Like, it seems like they have the money available, you apply for it, you get it, the money's gone.
Yes, so through the chair. So in some circumstances, if the grant funds the cash themselves, say they're provided from the grant provider, and then in a given year, if all of those funds weren't given out, then at least that difference between the revenue or the funds that were received by the county and those expenses to the grant, the people applying for the grant, in that way it doesn't kind of just fall to the bottom line, so to speak, or just general surplus, so that it holds whatever residual is there for future years and future grant opportunities, if that helps.
Yeah, so for those, for the Wheatland Wind and the solar, if there aren't requests for those funds, if there's leftover, the money, so that's a part of the agreement, is we still get the money, like Wheatland County still holds the money. It's not that they would just give whatever is asked for.
Yes, to the chair, that's correct. So it still holds there. So the reserve is a way to designate it separately so that it's not just going, it's going for that specific purpose of the grant. And then a part of the council report or the policy amendment that will bring forward a resolution, and we'll just be going back to the community services team to double check the balances. I believe before the current year, there's just been some recent approvals. They're around $10,000 or $20,000 rolling totals respectively. So those are balances that we'll bring as resolution for council to make sure that those go into the reserves that we are going to create and that they're available.
So then if an organization wanted to apply for that money outside of the grant allocate, you know, where there's an announcement that the grant is open, they could do that? We could give money to a project anytime in the year type thing? Is that how that would work? Or would it have to wait until the next funding announcement?
Yes, so through the chair, I'm not as familiar with the grant program itself that community services would be administering, but I believe it would be available. We could come back and verify that.
I'm just wanting to understand how it would work, that's all.
Yeah, through the chair, if you would like us to bring back information on the grants, we can do that in a future meeting, if that would help.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I guess just in terms of feedback, I guess if next time we're talking about the grants, if we could just get that kind of information, just whether it's a once a year offering or whether it's a year-round availability of funds, I guess I'm curious about that.
Through the chair, what I'll do is for when we bring forward the policy itself, I'll get a lot of background detail. We'll include that in that.
It looks good. I like the idea for the community abandoned structures one. That was, I think people will be happy to see that there's a possibility of, you know, some cleaning up of things in the future. I think people would even, support the operating expense going into it. I think it's good for our hamlets. It's good. Thank you.
Not a question, but maybe a comment. It was good to see that you have brownfields in their special purpose too, and that there is a reserve set aside for them. I just want to kind of bring to light the Carsland brownfield area that's right on Main Street that I feel one day will become fairly good real estate. And I know it's not our land right now, but anyway, just I'm glad to see that it's there and that it could maybe be used at one point. Thank you.
Any other questions? I just had one with the abandoned buildings. Would this be for buildings that are on our property? Or will we be going on to proper, like I know there's been cases in the past where structures have been dilapidated, but we didn't own the property. So I'd really like to stay away from that if we could. It'd just be our own property, but just, I don't know.
Through the chair, when we drafted this, the purpose and intent would be for properties or structures that are on county-owned property facilities.
Perfect, asked and answered.
And through the chair, it's important to note that there's times where a property goes to tax forfeiture, the county doesn't take it over, and there are abandoned structures on that property. So the county does have mechanisms to take title of that property, and that's after it goes to tax auction. If there's no bids at fair market value, then the county does. And if there is a concern on the property, I know there was one in Clooney a few years ago that the county ended up taking title to and removing that structure, and it was more of a health and safety concern. So that one was taken down, or we took title, took down the property, and we ended up just selling the lot back after everything was removed. But it does happen from time to time. There are some in various hamlets. I know there's one right now on our council resolution tracker in Clooney that is, we do have a potential offer on that property. We're just kind of working through the mechanisms of that. So ideally we get the people who own the property or another interested party to take it over, so the county's not necessarily involved. But there are mechanisms for us to take those properties over is the point I was looking to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Go ahead.
And just sometimes I know it's an expense, but if we do clean it up, then often the property is more saleable following that. And I think that's the goal here, to not own so much property.
Great. Is that the feedback staff needed? And we're going to come back to a council meeting for changes. Okay. Anything further? Since there's nothing else on this meeting, I will adjourn committee of the whole.